All right. I work for Google, but I'm doing this pretty much on my own. So let me just load in. Get started. For some reason, it's not recognizing this display.
It's not working?
Yeah, it's not recognizing this display now. I'm not sure why.
Just working.
I know. Well, yeah, but you're here. It'll work.
There we go.
Displays.
I think it's when I'm pressed on that.
Okay. That is the wrong date. I think that might have been the date that I started working on this. And I never changed it. Okay. And as always, you have to spot the typo because this is the first time I'm doing this. And I'm probably going to be redoing it. So we're going to do an intro. I'm going to talk about WP Rig. In my intro, I'm going to mention some things about AMP and some things about PWA. Show of hands, anybody know what AMP is? PWA? PWA? Okay, great. So I will not have to do the deep dive. I can go through it pretty quickly. So who do I talk for? I have, like I call the three tribes, right? Like the people who make the web work, people who make it look good, and the people who make it profitable. If you're in the people who make it work and the people who make it look good, you're going to love this. If you're in the people who make the web profitable, you're going to be checking your email in 10 minutes. I will not be offended, but you're going to tune out. You're not going to be interested in this much at all, because I'm not talking about monetization or anything like that. But I will be talking about some really useful things that will help you get a really great performing website and make it look good. So a little bit of my background. I have been writing code for 20 years, a full stack developer. I know, anybody else remember the correct settings for CGI bin? Anybody else here remember that? Okay. I've been a tech leader for 10 years. If someone knows what a tech leader is, please tell me, because I've been called that for 10 years now. No idea. I make excellent espresso. Don't overpack. That's the trick. Don't overpack. Compelling, smooth, and instant. This is the default text that came with the slide. I love it so much I keep it. I really wish this was my intro. Okay, why WordPress? This is Google's mission statement to organize the world's information, make it useful, and turns out a huge amount of the world's information is in WordPress, right? So it's a third of the web, 60% of the CMS market. So I spend a fair amount of time working on WordPress. I work on some of the other CMSs as well as some other products related to it, but it's the largest CMS and it's like one of the largest sources of pages. So what is AMP? Right, so let me give you a background. WordPress has a bit of a problem. If you look at the overall performance of WordPress sites, that's the green bar is the ones that are loaded and they're considered fast. Fast is a metric that's used in Crux data, and about 20% are fast, as opposed to 40% or a little bit slightly more than 40% of the web overall. This I think is a little bit dated. It might actually be 43%. Don't quote me on it. Again, nobody cares about that 2%. But there's a problem there. Likewise, the onload, it is not so good for WordPress. A lot of pages trail. They take a long time to load. And I think a lot of people have seen that. We have this solution called AMP. It's basically three parts to it, the HTML, JavaScript, and cache. I'm going to be mentioning the plugin, which is going to do a lot of the automation to get your HTML and AMP.js working. I'm not going to talk too much about the cache, because I'm just not going to have time. But if I had known that I had the whole 2 hours, I could talk for 2 hours. Nobody else would want to hear me talk for 2 hours, but I can talk for 2 hours. Okay. So this is what AMP looks like. It's basically like HTML. You got the little lightning bolt there that tells you it's AMP. And AMP has got a couple of really nice cool features. One is that it's non-blocking. It has the correct amount of synchronous JavaScript. Everybody know what the correct amount of synchronous JavaScript in pages? 0. That's right, he knows it. You get socks, man. I'm going to get the pair of socks for you. The correct amount of synchronous JavaScript, and the correct amount is 0, right? 0. So how does it relate to HTML? So basically every AMP page is an HTML page, but not every HTML page is an AMP page, right? So this little Venn diagram looks like weird little Muppet eyes. So there's no special plugins, use the existing browser, existing JS tooling. There's nothing special. It runs on the same V8 as everything else does. The reason we prefer this kind of solution, why we push AMP, is that it helps web page. We know what makes web pages fast. Here are 10 things. If you manually did these things to your pages, you will get a fast page. Here's what you get for AMP for free. You get these 6 just for being a valid AMP page, right? It's like getting the 200 points on the SATs for showing up, signing your name, same thing. You get these 6 items for free just for being a valid AMP page. In addition, the AMP plugin gives you minified and tree-shaken CSS, which is number 4, and minified and mostly tree-shaken JavaScript in the WP rig. Not exactly as nice as we would like it, but getting better all the time. We have this plugin. You install the plugin in WordPress, and that is the base step towards getting a really good performing web page. We call this, on the far left, you have reader mode. Reader mode is basically a very simple template. I'm going to be blunt about it. It's not the best looking thing in the world, but I have seen a lot worse pages. At least it doesn't have the construction guide, the animated GIF. It's not quite that GIF, but it doesn't look great. Native mode, for a lot of themes, it's pretty much identical. Where you do see some differences, they're very subtle differences that literally only I and 3 other obsessive people would notice. But you do notice some things like the borders around images are slightly different, or you don't have text overlaid on it, or you can't use SVG the same way. But these are very subtle changes. Most people will not notice them. I will notice them because I'm obsessive. So what's PWA? So that's PWA is Progressive Web App. The idea is to make your site fast, reliable, and engaging. App-like features, I'm going to just talk about these. There's a bunch of other things which I'm not going to talk about because I'm not going to have time, though you could hear me rambling about it on the way home if you wanted to. So add to home screen. So app-like experience means that when you start up your phone, you've got a little icon for your website, and it's right there, right? So that's app-like experience. The next thing is add to home screen. This is like a block that I literally took out. It's this little manifest.json file and explains basically what should be added, an icon, what the starting URL is, some different additional information. By the way, you can have, this is a subset of what's available. There's some more stuff available. You can go look it up. It's all described online. Push notifications. So if you use PWA inside of Chrome on both, I believe it's just on Android because iOS blocks push notifications from the browser, Safari. Correct me, I'm thinking of Safari 12 on mobile. If anybody knows 13 makes it optional, works yet or no? Okay, so on Android you have the push notifications look like native notifications, even if your app is not necessarily running at the time, because your service worker is providing it. For the best PWA experience, it's easily available to everybody. Go check out mobile.twitter.com. It is just like using an app. And then lastly, offline, right? So Guy is using your website. Guy walks into the subway. I'm using Guy in a non-gendered way. Person walks into the subway, and they can continue to read it. While they're on the subway, if they click on the icon, the last known stuff comes up, and they can look at it. When they come out, it'll refresh. If you do this correctly with little JSON bundles to update the data, if you do it correctly within the WP rig, I think it's, when we get to it, I'll talk about it. You can get it so that it'll transparently update things so that when you're on Wi-Fi, you'll get the newest thing. When you click on the button, you'll get a fresh page, exactly as if you're connected, even if you only read it on the subway. There's some excellent examples of offline. One thing about offline is you never see the dinosaur. We'll talk about it later, but the idea is that you'll be able to provide some little bit of color hinting in certain cases with the CSS styles to say what's available and what's not. So you can just disable clicking for things that are not available, but you'll be able to show the product listing page, but the product description page will be grayed out. But you can do that, and it's really awesome, and you can read about more on our offline UX best practices. Don't let people click on it and then show them an error page. That'd be bad. So this strategy is cache the network. By the way, there's a whole bunch of other caching strategies. I won't go into all of them. It'd be a great drinking game though, going through all of them. Every time I miss one, I take a shot. But there's a whole bunch of strategies. Cache the network is probably the one most PWAs need, especially most people who are working on a WordPress site. Okay, so I'm doing this pretty quickly to go through it. Okay, now we're going to get to WP Rig, and this is going to be where the fun starts. So WP Rig, if you the thing you should compare it to is underscore. I've worked with a couple of other theme builders as part of my job. I'm working with WP Engine. They have this wonderful Genesis theme. How would I compare the two? I would not. Genesis, when you sign up for WP Engine, you get integrations with a lot of rich stuff. When you download underscore, it's assumed that you're developing a theme from scratch. WP Rig is for developing a theme from scratch. It is not for all of the integration, so we provide a lot. What you get from WP Rig is you're not starting on the ground floor. You're starting with the foundation. You're starting with the sewage hookup. You're starting, the electrical line is coming in. You are ready to build with a lot of stuff. We even deliver some heavy equipment with you onto the site in the form of gold. So you're getting a lot from day one. And you're getting integration with the AMP plugin and the PWA plugin. So if you follow the rules and do not do the thing that we ask you not to do, you will get a site that works correctly with AMP, provides all the basic PWA functionality we talked about. You will not get push out of the box right now. You have to do a bunch of stuff to get push working. That's just the way push is. And you will have to go and make sure you have valid SSL certs. If everybody here, you know about Let's Encrypt? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Don't self-sign certs anymore. It's not 2003 anymore. Okay. Why mobile first? Check your traffic. Anybody here not seeing increasing mobile traffic? Everybody here sees increasing mobile traffic, right? Okay, so mobile first. I always say this all the time. Do not trust me. Trust what your numbers say. Do not trust me. I'm just a guy. It's true that I'm very handsome, like movie star looks, but do not trust me. Trust what your metrics say. If your metrics are saying that you have a huge amount of mobile users, believe it and make mobile first. Why AMP and PWA? We want things to perform well, and we want a better overall user experience. We don't want to sacrifice performance for that. You can get a really awesome site. Remember Flash? Download the 3 megabyte or 10 megabyte Flash bundle, and you get this really great app-like experience after 10 megabytes. That's not around anymore. We're not doing that anymore. We've got a really great basic framework with HTML5. JavaScript provides a lot of oomph now. It's pretty fast in most cases. But you don't do the big bundle. You provide things that trickle in, that are progressive, that provide a rich experience without blocking. Okay, why modern CSS? We dropped Sass support, and we can compile tomorrow's CSS to today's CSS. I still like Sass. Lots of people like Sass. I'm going to go through more on the CSS in a couple dozen slides ahead. There's no reason not to use the most modern CSS now. Everybody's familiar with putting variables in your CSS now, right? Okay. The new functionality in CSS means that you can write really good CSS. You don't have to repeat yourself. And I'm going to go talk about more about the functionality, but there's no reason to go and do Sass anymore. Okay, so how do you start? You just do a git clone for this and switch to the V2. V2 is beta. And beta means a fun thing that while I was verifying my demos for this, things were broken because I made the mistake because of muscle memory. I did a git pull and broke something. I don't know what I broke. But that's what happens. So it works with browser sync, or should be working with browser sync. Is not working with my setup on browser sync now. And because I am not using VS, everybody here use VS Code, or a lot of people use VS Code? Yeah, VS Code is one of those newfangled browsers all the kids are using these days. I use the same browser I've been using for decades now. So, excuse me, the same editor I've been using for decades now. So I don't really know VS Code very well. But if you use VS Code, there's a lot of solid integration with PHP Code Sniffer. If you check the README, it'll tell you what you need to configure. It's a lot of stuff that you probably already have. Gulp. Anybody here not using Node? Yeah, okay. To find somebody who's not using Node, I think you need the DeLorean and go back to 1990 something. So you basically do this, do npm install, loads of packages, and then you edit the little configuration file, set it up, and you just give it a name. I just pick Bacon Pancakes because my kids love that song. So you edit the configuration file, add some theme details, and then the defines are set up based on the build. Here's a really awesome thing. WP Rig, and I'm going to mention this a few more times in this, but when you use underscore or a lot of other theme kits, you download it, and then you fork it, and then you can't update it. Updating is all kinds of merge conflicts and headaches. This is set up from the beginning that you will be able to track the head or the release versions, stable release versions of WP Rig in the future. So as WP Rig gets updated to provide functionality for other plugins or other common things that might be necessary in the future, you'll be able to just go and do a pull, probably very minor merge updates if you needed to, if you're doing something really weird and funky, like insisting on using SAS or something like that. But other than that, you should just be smooth sailing, update, and continue on. All of the theming and all of the things of replacing the slugs with the right places, all that stuff is done by the build. Okay. Always update upstream wing. I already just said all of these things. You can also have multiple WP Rig themes in the same WordPress instance, each with a namespace. So if you're doing something experimental, like some push notification stuff or integration with e-commerce package, which I can't talk about. If you're doing any of those things and you need to have multiple themes, WP Rig supports that very easily. Live editing with browser sync when it is working. So basically, npm something dev, and then hit enter, and then it comes right up, and you can, in theory, proxy it. It was not working for me. I broke something. Run dev was not working, but it'll run all the commands and serve that. So some other things. The WP Rig 1.0 had a weird development environment that's just basically an artifact of the way the developers were working on it. That's not the case anymore. So it's just the way you would work in underscore any one of the other theme kits out there. There's no special dev directory. There's no separate build directory. That makes sense because a bunch of the people working there were Google employees, and there's a convention in Google. Whenever possible, we are using the WordPress styles and the WordPress, basically the way things are done in the WordPress community. We're taking those things and using them as best we can. We use the PHP style guide and the JavaScript style guide from WordPress, not the Google one. And likewise, the layout of the directory structure is exactly the way underscore does it, and the same thing that everybody else in the WordPress community does. We're no longer de-Googleizing it as much as possible. It's also, the templates parts now are much smaller, more granular, so you could edit them, be a little bit safer in editing them. You're no longer dealing with these large files. So you only have to touch very small parts of the code base. If you're only really interested in modifying the nav bar, it's in one spot. If you're only really interested in the footer, it's in one spot. If you really only want to add like something to the configuration, in your theme configurator, if you want to do it in one spot, there's only like 2 spots, I think, or 2 spots for that. Okay, let me go to a quick example. 1, 2. Can everybody read this? Okay, so let me go to whatever this one here. Taxonomies. Oh no, I can't see this thing. So if I wanted to remove tags, like say I just don't even care about categories. Now, I could just go and comment on these pieces over here and just take it right out, or you can just delete it. Break. And when I rebuild, I had to write my own builder here because this wasn't working. This, you don't need to see my chat to my wife. And I should have shown you the tags here before I deleted them. Okay, let me just remove it then. Or I might not have had a tag here in this. Oops. By the way, anything you build with WP Rig uses blocks right out of the box. You'll see this thing enable AMP. If you see AMP issues with certain things, because you're doing weird stuff, like I was working with a couple other plugins recently, so you might see things which were broken, in which case you can disable AMP for that one thing. By default, you can have it so that it's AMP native. Let me just go here, do this out of order, but that's okay. You'll notice that things built with WP Rig, so your theme is active and has built-in AMP support. That's something that if you implement it in your other theme, if you check out from underscore, you could do that by hand and get the exact same functionality. You just have to implement a couple of rules that are well documented up on the AMP plugin website, but you get this for free. Here, go to posts. So I'm going to first add a tag. Okay, great. Okay, there should be tags showing up here. Tags are not showing up here yet.
You can save it.
You didn't update it.
Did it update? I must have updated. I did this.
The post itself.
The post itself I did not save, yeah. Yes.
There it is. It's on top.
Yep, tag. Okay, great. So now let me go back here to with browser sync, you should be able to get this working without having to go rerun the build, which is the whole point of browser sync. You'll be able to go and do a lot of changes, specifically anything to the PHP parts. Most of the partials, you'll be able to edit them and not have to do a rebuild. It'll just show up in the, in the browser really quickly. Almost anything else will be watched, and you can have it trigger off the build. The JavaScript processing is expensive. It takes a while. That's the biggest part here. So if you're doing a lot of stuff in JavaScript, okay, and the tags are gone. So we just removed tags, and it went away. That's it. So it's really easy to go remove everything. Almost everything is in one spot, only one spot, and that is a specific design feature. We want to make this as small and granular as possible. So let me go back and undo this here. Okay, let me go back to the so that's there. Okay. You never see underscore WP rig. You see it all over in the main source code. You do not see it when it's built, and it removes everything, the whole processing part. I think I already said this, but I had it in here. I already showed the deployment. Okay, great. So to talk about what AMP ready means, right? So if you see your theme has built-in AMP support, that's a whole bunch of stuff that involves the plugin. Among that, there's a bunch of functions, wrapper functions, that have to be in your code to let the plugin know that this is safe to render as AMP, and also provide hinting on what can be rendered AMP and what cannot be rendered AMP. And that's not, that's a really interesting functionality, because there's a couple of places where you'll want to like bifurcate your code into the AMP part and the non-AMP part, right? So there's a bunch of AMP components which replace what people traditionally do with handwritten JavaScript. One is the AMP menu, right? Does AMP navigate the hamburger menu? Everybody sees the hamburger menu, right? So AMP provides an entire navigation system that's very rich. It provides a lot of functionality, and that component you could use that instead of the traditional JavaScript pull-down menu system. AMPS leans on CSS over JavaScript. And I think most people should be attempting to lean on CSS over JavaScript whenever possible. JavaScript is always the most expensive thing on your web page, and if it's synchronous, JavaScript is even more expensive. So by providing that, we can say within the theme, this navigation part, render it this way if it's AMP, this way if it's not AMP. At any given time within your post, you can say that this post cannot be rendered as AMP. That happens with pages. So say you're using a plugin that does not work with AMP, like WP Forms. It's about 5 or 6 form editors. Almost none of them work with AMP. All of them specifically inline blobs of JavaScript all over the place, and that almost never works with AMP. So on that page, you can say, opt out of AMP. I do not want this to be an AMP, and then it'll render as plain old HTML. And that's always the fallback. Tree shaking. So one of the really cool features of AMP, right, is that because the layout is static, even though the content is dynamic, the layout you can't write JavaScript that does what I call unspeakable horrors to the DOM, like you're rewriting the DOM on the fly. You can't do that in AMP. Because of that, you know exactly what the layout of the page is going to be. So there's absolutely no point in which there could be a style that is introduced or used on something that wasn't there at load. Right? So we know what styles will be used at the time of load. And because of that, within the header portion, we can go and inline all the CSS that's needed just for that page and only that page. So instead of loading dozens and dozens of style sheets and using a fraction of that CSS, we can inline and have only the CSS that is needed, and we can crunch it up, minify and minimize it just on the header band. So you've got one paint, straight top down, one paint. Okay. Anybody ever go into the, when you go into the Chrome DevTools, I guess, or in Firefox, same exact thing, DevTools. Have you ever seen like repaint, like pages that have repaint events as all the DOM keeps getting? Yeah, poor DOM is getting abused. So people are going to rewriting the DOM, iterating or populating with all kinds of bits of analytics code. And then you see this like repaint event happening like dozens of times. And a lot of it is off the screen. So you're moving pixels you can't see off the screen while you're loading it. It's just not great. So I could go, let's go to navigation.php. I can spend more time in the editor looking at code, and you guys can just call out stuff you're interested in. If you want to do that?
I'd like to see the file structure of it.
Sure. Okay, so I can walk through it as I go through the other slides here. But this is basically the way every other WordPress theme is now set up. Everything starting with, I guess, 4.9 something or other has followed mostly this convention. You have a config directory, an assets directory, an inc directory. Optional is used by some. A vendor part also is used by some. This is incredibly simple, straightforward, and as un-Google-like as possible. If you've ever seen any, I don't know if anybody, are you a Google employee? Yeah. We have our own way of doing everything there, which is often different than the rest of the world. They have, whenever possible, followed the conventions used by the WordPress community. And it's really nice, and we don't expect you to install your own separate build tool and your own JavaScript compiler and 17 different other tools. It's simple and straightforward. So the asset directory, it follows the same convention, CSS, images, and JS. The convention of using underscores for all the things that are going to be pulled in follows that convention exactly the same. We are using, I should have jQuery here. The navigation, I believe, is the standard. Yeah. This navigation is pretty either identical or similar to what is currently used in a lot of other templates. It's the standard menu drop-down system. You don't need to use that in AMP. And both SVGs and JPEGs as well as PNGs are easily usable. but it's pretty simple, straightforward. In the config directory, you'll see that there's a theme config file for telling it how to load up the configuration files. There's also this very simple JSON file. In the JSON file, you see the browser sync configuration is there. I think browser sync is now moved elsewhere, which is why I couldn't get it to work. But I haven't really followed along. But this is very simple. You just clone this, copy right over. Yeah, I would not do a git pull right now because I don't want to break anything. But that's it. Back here. It's navigation PHP. Okay. WP rig is AMP. So.
Can you zoom in? Can you make the text larger?
Oh, sure. I do this here. I think it's because I have it on my. Let's see if I can make this larger.
Command plus.
Yeah, I think I have Command plus map to something else here. Yeah, I have Command plus map to my shell. What I could do here. Do I have it here? Yeah, let me just put it here then. It's easier to read. Okay, this is easier to read. Talk about this. So the idea here is that whenever possible, you can go in your theme, you can say, I would like to use this AMP component separate from this non-AMP component. So if there's something which is AMP specific, you just put it right in there, use the standard AMP component. In some cases, you might have a situation where your HTML page will be able to support something that your AMP page will not be able to support, and you will decide that for the AMP page, I will use this smaller subset, and for the HTML page, I will use this big, ugly other blob of code. It could also be that this code will work really well on a desktop. This code will not work well on a desktop. One thing you could do, and I've had this conversation just recently, your AMP can assume that the person using it is working on a mobile device, and all of your very specific mobile code will be in the AMP code. And your HTML code will be assuming that person has a physical keyboard. So if you have all of these specific bits of code, AMP configurations designed so that the person is going to use the correct, like one thing you should always be doing for your mobile sites, use the correct keyboard. Like don't use the QWERTY keyboard if the person is typing in a number. Right? I see that for zip code all the time. I guess you have to do that for Canada, right? Canadian zip codes have letters in them. But I see this all the time, like you go to type in a zip code and it's the QWERTY keyboard, which I assume is only just for Canada, I guess. But, or type in a phone number and you get the QWERTY keyboard. I shouldn't have to do that. If you configure it the right way, you should be able to go and make your very mobile specific bits of code separate in your theme. And again, have one single source code. This is one thing I haven't really harped on as much, or probably should be explaining. One of the really awesome things about this theme kit is that when using AMP and PWA plugin, you have one source code base for your mobile and your desktop users. And those places where they have to diverge, there's a very simple, consistent way of doing that, handling that situation. So you're not going to have like the old days of the M site, right? You're not going to have that anymore. And you're not going to have a responsive theme which looks awesome on mobile and terrible on desktop. You can have it so that it looks good in both environments. Okay. Component PHP file is AMP call, yeah. Live list. So there's an AMP component called live list. Okay. Using AMP live list, I'm going to try to make this bigger. I can't even read this screen. Okay, let me just go inside the font.
CX, C++.
Hmm?
CX, C++.
CXC plus, okay, thank you. I have everything really weirdly mapped here. I have command plus set up to go into my shell, so things are always working the same. So this should be easy to read. So amp live list. So there's a component called live list, and the really great thing is that if you have comments on your page, live list can go in and automatically update, refresh the screen as new comments are added, which is really nice. Unfortunately, I can't do that on this sample site because I don't have local people commenting. It's just running my local device. But you can have it so that as people are adding comments, you'll be able to refresh and show up live. That only works on AMP. So your HTML site, if you want to go and have it use some other component that provides that interactive live list, you could do that separate component. Custom properties. I'm going to talk more about the CSS part. So CSS custom properties, has anybody here used them? Familiar with them? Yeah, so you use variables essentially to go and avoid having to go and duplicate large blocks of code. If you've ever seen sites that like have light mode and dark mode, and it's basically 2 copies of the CSS, we want to get rid of that, right? So we want to have it so that light mode and dark mode is basically just setting 1 or 2 variables and reusing huge chunks of the code, and basically just changing a couple of variables and having everything re-rendered so you handle both. And that means using CSS custom properties. Because that is not supported on all of the browsers out there. I think a lot of people are using older browsers that you cannot do that on. We provide post CSS to compile, basically tomorrow's CSS to today's CSS for legacy support. So if you use custom properties, you can then recompile it down to the CSS you use now. That does mean that you duplicate a lot. Excuse me.
Is it serving the compiled CSS always, or is it determining which CSS to load?
That is an awesome question because there are 3 separate answers which are all true and really contradictory. If you're using AMP, you're always serving the inline CSS, which means it's always have to have been compiled. It'll be compiled by the tree shaker. If you're in HTML mode, whether you're serving the whole compiled one or the pre-cached one depends on what other settings you have set up. The answer is it depends. If you're serving AMP, you are going to always serve the tree shaken compiled CSS because that's the best option for AMP. As far as serving the native, if you disable post CSS, you can always serve just that 1 native copy, and that's it.
But it's not like that.
But what you'll need to do is there's a function that you'll have to go in and wrap around it, and what you'll do is basically, like if you want to have light mode and dark mode, so you'll have within your configurator, you'll have something where you set light mode or dark mode as a drop down, and then your PHP will wrap that function. You above it or below it, you'll say dark mode set to true or some other whatever blob is, and then you'll spit out a piece of CSS. That'll be added, and then everything else will be catted behind it. Just basically catted behind it, and that'll enable light mode or dark mode. So it might be like a couple lines of CSS, or it might be 24 lines of CSS, however you have it set up. By modern CSS, we follow WordPress guidelines. 2D layout is always with grid, which is really nice. Lists and blocks are always with flex, again, which is always nice. Editable CSS is in a special directory. It's the same directory as some of the more modern theme builder kits. So it behaves exactly the way you expect. Partial is a prefix with an underscore incredibly consistently. There's a global CSS that is exactly what you expected. It's everywhere. So you're gonna wrap something for when the global CSS is presented. You can put it there, or you can have your users edit global to go and manually put in the triggers for whatever the thing is, depending on how you guys want to set it up. Progressive loading of CSS in HTML mode. It's really clever about loading the critical stuff above the fold first, and then trickling everything below it. Yeah, I'll wait for time. I almost need a pod. We dropped support for Sass. I still like Sass. I think did anybody here like Sass? Besides me? Yeah, it's nice. There's a lot of stuff I used to like that we don't do anymore, right? But using Post CSS is actually a really good experience. Modern CSS is just another thing to learn. It's fine, maybe at some point I'll learn a new editor. Custom properties of CSS file. I don't know if I want to drop back down to the editor here for this. Let me first explain what you can see. The driver principle, don't repeat yourself, right? So has anybody ever gone into the Chrome development tools and done coverage, CSS, and seen like you're using 8% of the styles? Right? Has anybody ever seen that? Right. So you can, in the Chrome developer tools, you go into like performance, right? And then one of the tabs on the bottom, there's a coverage tool. You reload, and it'll give you code coverage for JavaScript and CSS. Just for fun, do it on your websites and see if like you're using like a single-digit percentage of CSS on any given page. You'll be amazed how often I see this. One site, which is my kid's school site, they had nearly 800K of CSS and less than 20K was actually used anywhere. All of it was basically stuff that people just added everything. It's like a stray puppy that follows you along. You don't want to let it go. You just add it to the file and you keep it there forever. So it's all this just crap that builds up. You should still delete it, but if you don't delete it, the tree shaker will do that for you, right? I am amazed at if you use the coverage tool, like how often you see that. If you do it with themes built with this theme kit, and I did it with the 1.0 one, you'll find that you get like 80% of your JavaScript is used and like 90-something% of your CSS is used pretty consistently. And that's really nice. That means you're not serving bytes that are not necessary for the page. Likewise, it does a fair amount of image optimization so that you're not serving pixels that don't get displayed, which is also really nice. And you get that as part of the build. It's free. Let's go to the custom properties. Let's go in. Oh, custom media. By the way, if you want to deal with weird sizes, like a tablet in portrait mode and landscape mode having different options, you can do that. It's really cool. Custom media for like if you're going to do something for a magical set-top box. I always hear about set-top boxes. Okay. Make things red. 900 is red, right? By the way, I always love it when Emacs users tell me what commands, because everybody assumes everybody's commands are. None of my commands are standard. They haven't been. Like, I'm no longer using Emacs. I'm using something else, something completely alien. I think that's what ends up happening to everybody. Okay, there we go. So we just change it to red just by changing one spot there. It's red consistently everywhere because we use that one variable. So this is what it looks like here. You've got this root. If you want to change your fonts, if you want to change any aspect of theme. If you wanted to go and have a dark mode or a light mode, you could do pretty easily. I would probably suggest that there's probably 5 or 6 global things you need to change. Yeah, you could probably you could probably replace a couple of things here and reverse it. The global font family, there's probably some background theme that you can do here. Some daylight, yeah. I don't know, how far do we want to dig it to the CSS? Do we want to dig more?
Is it hooking up to Gutenberg in a smart way, the CSS variables? Like, is it extracting like the themes to put in the CSS in the Gutenberg color selector? Is it doing something like that? Or?
No. We could, I guess. Back here. So, right here. So if you go to the theme appearance, themes, okay, that's already set up, customize. Okay, you go to colors here, You could change the colors here in terms of header background, but the individual like bits of text and stuff, it's not all wired in. I mean, the additional CSS, you could edit it here if you wanted to be consistent. Within theme options, there's only this one, which is, we can show that in the code as well. It's not quite as rich as like providing those. You could do that if you wanted to, like provide all those options there. What you would actually have to do is go within the customize the PHP file and the JavaScript file, edit those two places, and you could provide selectors. As far as what the selectors are within here, I don't know what they would be called. I have to look it up. You could do it. No one's stopping. If you wanted to do it and contribute it, I'm sure they'd be happy to take that change. So if you're editing the blocks here, it just knows what the color of the themes are supposed to be. If you go and edit here, like text, the selector for the text. Yeah, I don't think you're going to find any weird options here. And the color settings here, just the standard ones. There's nothing special here. This one, the theme, maybe? These look like the standard ones, aren't they? We can test that, I guess. Let's go to the themes.
Need the next one, the next block, the last one.
Yeah, okay. No, looks like they are different.
Oh, cool.
I guess it does do that. I didn't know it did. That's a really nice question that you helped me answer. Yeah, I guess it does use that. That's actually pretty cool. See, I thought that would have to be not within the CSS file. I thought that would have to be within the PHP file, that it would the entry point that would have to know to do that, unless the entry point tells it to please look at the CSS file.
Yeah, it's like compiling it.
Yeah. Gutenberg continues to impress me. So every time I keep finding it, I feel like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I do a turn, and all of a sudden there's a waterfall there. I didn't know it would be there. Where's Bacon Pancakes? By the way, I have compared this to a few other theme builders. You saw I have Genesis set up. I feel kind of awkward saying this, but if you were starting from scratch, WP Rig is definitely a really good tool. If you were starting with, like, if you're an agency and you're going to be implementing 30 sites a year, eventually you could build something as good as what you can get with one of the professional high-end starting parts, but eventually. But some of the things like Genesis is really amazing. It's really impressive. Some of the other theme builder kits some of the other agencies use, they're really impressive. WP Rig is new, and it does a lot of good things. Some of the other...
More of a framework than a theme?
It's, again, that's a really interesting question that can have multiple philosophical answers here.
Oh, sorry.
So it is meant to support some of the best practices in terms of AMP PWA. So in that case, yeah, I guess it's kind of like a framework. Likewise, we are providing, anybody here use underscore? Right, so yeah, underscore really does feel like 2003. It's fine for what it is. It's a good starting point. I think the fact that you've seen so many theme building kits come in the past few years is because underscore is not exactly the best starting point anymore. This should be viewed as a competitor to underscore and not a competitor to like this. You're not going to do WooCommerce in this in an afternoon. Like you're not going to build a WooCommerce competitor in WP Ring in an afternoon. You're not. But are you going to build like a really good starting point for like build a really nice theme? Absolutely. Are you going to build a theme that works really well with mobile devices? Absolutely. And provides all the stuff that you want in a modern experience. Add to home screen, push notifications. Yes, you'll be able to do all that stuff. Let's go back to this. Okay, theme properties. Yeah. So it's built with the customizer in mind. I think I have a thing. Let me go to the customizer code. Okay, so there's two parts here, the customizer. The customizer component PHP. So this is the customizer. Any place here you would have to go and add the part that you're actually providing customization for. You'd have to enqueue it, tell it to make it available. And then these are the parts that's available to it. And then customizer JS file as well. Yep. And this is the JS, so that this is where you would add your customizations here. A hypothetical switch between light mode and dark mode would appear here. You just set it to do a drop down, and you'd switch between it. And it would literally be like editing two files. Okay, so let's go on. Last part, it uses Workbox. So I'm a big fan of Workbox. Here's a really cool feature about the PWA support. You write your code in PHP and it shows up as JavaScript. You're already probably using a bunch of service workers you don't know about. If you go into your Chrome development tools, go into your application tab, you'll see that you've got a ton of service workers. It provides routing, caching, offline comments and stuff at the browser level. If you have push notifications to anybody, you're probably using a service worker. You could write bits of PHP that compile to JavaScript and then are enqueued to use the service worker. You can add features that run locally from your website. So you write a bit of code, that code gets turned into JavaScript, it gets added to your service worker, and it runs locally. Offline PHP, I won't keep jumping back to the code. In offline PHP, you can define what you're going to see when the user's offline. There are places there where you can hook to go and add JavaScript to do things like tell you when the last refresh was, which is a great thing if it's like a stock mode. This is 4 hours old, this is 12 hours old. Your sports scores, you can say that the game is already in progress. You can provide that within that hook. 500 template, no dinosaur even if you have a fatal error. We want to eliminate the dinosaur. Dinosaurs went extinct once. We're going to try it a second time. Manifest.json. You could do that without the PWA plugin. In fact, you just add that JSON file, and you can provide that add to home screen functionality. Live list and push. Live list is just like old school Ajax, basically. It's nothing magical special. Push notifications are special. Don't abuse them. Please don't the page warms up and you accept pushes. My recommendation to everybody is don't ask someone to opt into pushes unless they've done something, right? If you bought a product, ask, do you want to be notified via push? If they've created an account, do you want to be notified by push? Don't just land on the page and ask for push. It annoys everybody, and I look at the metrics. Nobody adds yes. They add yes by accident. Comments.php. If you go into the comments component, you'll see that it uses AMP live list on an AMP page. By the way, there's a very special term for an invalid AMP page. It's called an HTML page. So if you wanted to go and add this AMP component to your regular HTML page and make it an invalid AMP page with an AMP component, you could do that. It works. There are people we used to call that dirty AMP, but it's fine. You could go and do it. We're no longer enforcing that any kosher rules to AMP usage. I'm not using VS Code. I try to use VS Code. I can't do anything. I have to use keyboard shortcuts. I'm sorry. It's taken a while to get to this point. But yeah, so I can go do more demos, but I have demos and I have socks. The dude who answered the async question, you get the first pair of socks. The correct amount of asynchronous JavaScript on your page is what, guys? Zero.
Zero.
That's right. 0. I have socks here. I have business cards. I also have the very, very rare William Wallace Wampu. If anybody wants a William Wallace Wampu, that's Wampu riding the chrome dinosaur, holding a sword, and holding AMP as a shield. I happen to love this guy. But I can go and answer some questions. Oh, by the way, SiteKit, WP rig, AMP plugin to PWA plugin. Look at this guy here. Okay. Any questions? Okay, this guy over here.
What are you doing with WP Engine and Studio Press? For
I am speaking in Austin next week.
okay.
Our team helped them make them AMP compatible.
Okay.
So Genesis is now AMP compatible as of I think last week or something. Genesis 3.0. And I'm also working with some other people helping their theme kits become AMP compatible and PWA compatible. I can't mention anybody who hasn't announced. I can't.
Are there server requirements for the actual push notifications? I was confused how you're just handling that.
God. Yes.
Okay.
So you have to have SSL. It has to be a valid cert. You have to go and enable a push provider. You have to do a bunch of registration. You have to provide a bunch of like .well knowns in different places. There's a whole big. You don't do this lightly. You do it. It's an investment. I recommend if you can. I recommend Firebase because I'm Google. But if you're not Google and you want to use somebody else, I would not feel hurt. I would recommend that whenever possible, use a third-party provider, unless you're willing to do all of the work yourself. And I don't think you should. Honestly, you seem like a nice person. I would not wish that server work on you. Just get a service provider. Firebase works great. Any other questions? Anybody want more socks? Thoughts?
Wait, you have socks?
AMP socks.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me get more.
And the business is gone.
Anybody else? Okay.
Do you have a default for them?
Is the default mobile site or the offline site the AMP site?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. No, you can keep them.
And that's the same for like what you would add to Homescreen for?
So the default. Anybody else to get socks and wants pairs? I think so. Thank you. Okay. Problem is that the sock streams out and changes the course. Okay, that's it. The socks. I have Wampus if anybody wants them. They're over here. The very rare William Wallace Wampu. And my card. The default should be so if you set up and say native AMP, the default means AMP, and the fallback is HTML if you can't render an AMP page. So again, the technical term for an invalid AMP page is HTML page, right? So if you want to have it so that you do everything in AMP, and that some pages are going to be broken AMP, in which case rendered HTML, you can do that as well.
And so does it provide like a helpful starting point if you wanted to have an actual more substantial PWA that was offline as opposed to just like an AMP site for reading content?
Yeah, if you go into Lighthouse, Lighthouse gives you a bunch of things that you have to implement, right? One is that like the heartbeat, like so you have to be able to respond to 200 codes correctly. You have to be able to have a correct 500. You have to be able to handle. You have to have a correct SSL setup. There's a couple other things you have to do. If you do all of those things, you're PWA, right? If you follow all those rules, you're PWA. It's just the official term for it. As far as other things like push, other browser integrations, those things are optional. You don't have to do those to be a PWA. But the basic stuff you can all pretty much get out of the box. If you follow everything here, you're still not completely a PWA. You still have to make sure you have handlers for the 200 and so on. But other than that, yeah, you should be fine. Yes.
You need 2 sets of code, sort of, if you want a desktop version and the moment, no? If
One set of code.
And code will work on.
One set. Yeah, if you're really clever about it, if you make use of the media functions correctly, you'll be able to scale things correctly, and it should just handle it. In some cases, what might want to do is within your PHP code, you could say, if it's an amp, do this. If it's not an amp, do that. In which case, your amp will be the mobile site, and your non-amp will be the HTML site.
How do you do that?
It just there's a function call that determines whether or not you're in amp mode or not. You're in amp mode on a mobile device. Yes?
Is there a way to make it part of an amp site? If you're doing an amp site, is there a way to give it a variable tagline? So have a tagline that changes on every page or some decent fraction of pages without breaking Google?
You could don't.
Okay.
If you're saying that you want to, don't make your AMP page look too dramatically different from your HTML page.
No. This is just the sort of thing where I want to have like a snarky tagline that rotates. So on one visit you might get, I'm an AI researcher. So on one visit you might get artificial intelligence. On another one you might get
Okay. So within the Google Search Console, if there's content differentiation between your HTML page and your AMP page, it views them as being two separate pages. Within AMP, you have this thing where it says canonical page, and on your canonical page you say AMP page, and they should be matched. They should look identical. So if you're serving it from the same source code, then when it's served as AMP mode, it'll say that it's an AMP page, and if it's served in HTML, it'll say HTML page, and it'll give each other's coordinates. The AMP page will say the HTML page is this way, the HTML page will say the AMP page is that way. If the content is different, and if you don't distinguish it, like within the div or something, you provide some kind of hinting that it's dynamically generated, that it should be scoped out, the Search Console will say these are two different pages with the same URL, and both of them are bad then. And the Search Console will push it down. This is documented on the Webmasters page. Please keep your content the same for your HTML and your AMP pages. Don't make it too dramatically different because it really does cause problems. I mean, it makes it hard for search to go and provide good organic results. Don't try to mess with the search, please. Okay.
This wasn't meant to be part of the content at all. This was just like a snarky greeting, like "Hello world."
Oh, okay.
And the page body would still be entirely the same. It just be like.
Oh, then it shouldn't be a problem then. If you're talking about like significantly changing the content of the page, don't. But if you're talking about just like a snarky thing on the bottom, sure. Like if it's outside of the body, that's fine. If you use the HTML5 semantic comments, there's a couple places in the semantic comments where, like, if your tags, like if things were different, it wouldn't count it against it because it's considered like a caption area. If the caption was slightly different, then it wouldn't count, but the content should be the same. Again, this is in the Webmaster site. They explain this. Like I know because I pointed this before. People are saying, why is it not counting my AMP pages as valid or not directing traffic to my AMP pages? And it's because your AMP pages aren't valid pages because they look dramatically different. They look significantly different. Like you're providing basically 1,600 word article on your HTML page and providing a 250 word snippet on your AMP page with an additional hook to load the rest of it. Well, search does not view those two things as the same. It views one as being a full valid page and the other being something that's part of a page. And it will not direct traffic to the broken page. It shouldn't. So we provide guidance on what you're supposed to do to make your pages visible in search, and I'm going to stick to it.
Thank you.
Okay.